Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Before we get started, here's your reminder to subscribe to this channel, hit all the buttons, get all the alerts so you know when we are posting a new video or a new podcast. If you love what we're doing, you can now support this podcast. You can go and click the link to support us and help bring more great information, inspiration, conversations about all types of magic, witchcraft, folk magic, all that good stuff. So please support this podcast. We love what we do and we want to keep doing it for you. Don't forget, you can learn more about me and food magic and the power of kitchen witchery by visiting me directly at cucinaaurora.com. And I am all over social media at Cucina Aurora. So come find me. Let's hang out on social and talk kitchen witchcraft. For today's episode of Conversational Witchcraft, we have Denny Sargent. Denny is a writer, artist, and university instructor who has a master's degree in history, intercultural communications. He has been involved in a number of esoteric traditions and groups. He's written for magazines and anthologies in the US and Japan, and has written books and articles on paganism, Western occultism, spells, folklore, magic, and tantra. Denny is the author of 10 books and co-authors of 2 more, including Werewolf Magick, Werewolf Pack Magick, and the Book of Dog Magic. He is an elder guardian. He is also an elder guardian of the Horus Maat Lodge and has edited and written parts of 2 books for the organization. Denny, I am very happy to have you here. I think we're going to have a lot of really good conversations because you do a lot of animal magic and dog magic and werewolf magic, and I am excited.
Me too.
I'm really excited because I love to learn about people's journeys. And so far on this show, I have not had anyone come to talk to me about dog magic specifically or werewolf magic. And so this really interests me. So I want to learn all about you and how you came to be down this path. Like, take us back to your first experience with magical workings.
Wow. Okay. I'm originally from New York City, so I could spend the next 2 hours talking about my experiences in New York City. Oh, you're from
I'm
New York?
originally from New York, not New York City. I'm
Where?
from Long Island.
Oh, Long Island.
Long Island, couldn't you tell?
I lived in Brooklyn Heights. My parents lived in Rye, New York, but anyway.
In
So yeah,
Rye, my dad grew up near Rye.
okay, yeah. So, but I ended up living in Brooklyn Heights with a friend of mine and his family, and I was initiated as a Welsh traditional witch in the 70s,
Wow.
and yeah, no, I got a lot of great witchcraft stories if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
I used to go to Margot Adler's big gatherings. All the witches would come to her house, and oh
Wow.
no, I got tons of stories if you want to hear them.
New York witchcraft in the 70s. What was that like?
It was the best, but it was chaotic and dangerous and crazy. But I was
I imagine.
a punk rocker, so I was fine. But yeah, so I've been a witch for a long time. I moved my way up to 3rd degree Welsh trad, but now I
Wow.
hang out with other people all over Seattle. So anyway, I mean,
Right.
we can talk about witchcraft, but I could go on forever.
Well, like how did you find that path? Like, listen, I grew up in New York in the 80s and 90s. So like for me, my experience was very different, right? I mean, I was in the suburbs of New York. It was super Catholic. There was no besides, books and movies and television where magic was shown as, fantasy. It didn't exist for me until I got much older. So, what was your experience? Like, you're a kid, you're in New York. Like, how did
Well,
you find the path?
like I as a young kid, like as a like a 12, 11 year old,
Yeah.
I knew I was a pagan. I knew I was a witch. I've got Paul Hewson's book when I was like 10. So I've always been a witch. It's a karma thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And I managed to connect with another teenage witch, or yeah, he was initiated at that point. There was no internet at that point, but through Fate magazine. I don't know if you remember Fate magazine.
No.
It was a little booklet that I mean, I lived in a town where there wasn't much stuff. And in the back of it, it was like psychic stuff. And in the back, there were little like, oh, I would like to meet somebody. I'd like to meet somebody. There was my friend said, oh, I'm looking for other teenage pagans and witches. And we had to do it by, by handwriting, by correspondence.
Yes, yes,
And
the
then we ended up
personal ads.
becoming, I ended up living with him and his parents and in Brooklyn Heights. And he was already, even though he was, what, 14, he was already initiated into a witchcraft, into a Welsh trad coven. So
Wow.
the center of everything at that time there was only one occult store, and that was the Magical Child. And
Wow.
originally it had been, what was it? I don't remember, but Herman and Eddie changed it to Magical Child. And that I didn't know anything about any of this. I'm coming from the burbs, like, you're from Long Island.
Right.
And uh, and I went to the Magical Child and I was like, home.
Yeah.
My friend Robert, who's passed away, worked there, even though he was 14, which was at that time technically illegal. But
Right.
no, this was a great time in New York. New York in the 70s there was no rules about anything. So
Madness.
so he worked there, but he couldn't take money because it was illegal. So he just took every single occult book as compensation. So he had like the greatest occult library in the world.
As this
Um,
14-year-old kid just hanging out Brooklyn Heights with the best
Pretty
occult
much
library.
14, 15. Yeah, I used to hang out with him. And then we got to see because it was the only store, we got to see every single kind of occult person and witchcraft person come through the store because I would sit in the back with him,
Wow.
behind the counter. Anton LaVey would come and Ray would show up, and anybody you can think of in the early times of witchcraft would come. Oh, Leo Louis Martello was hilarious.
Wow.
There were so many great, yeah. I didn't know. I was like, who's that? Oh, that's Anton LaVey. I'm like, oh, all right. That explains the horns on the head. So it was a hoot.
Wow. I mean,
Life is
talk about
it was fun.
a unique experience in witchcraft. Most people I talk to are like, well, I had a hard time finding the path. I had to discover da 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 da. And you're like 12 hanging out in this store where like
14, 14.
and the like it's coming to you. Was
Oh
there
no, I knew when I was a kid that I was a witch. I mean, I started when I was in fifth grade, fourth grade. I was reading like all the books about the different gods and the Greek gods, and then I knew, I mean, witches know. I
we
think a
do
lot of
know.
witches, when we're five, we're like, we're doing spells and looking for fairies. So
But what's
yeah,
amazing to me is that there was no one sitting over your shoulder going,
no,
don't do
I
that.
had to get initiated in the Welsh tradition. I had to get a letter of permission from my mother,
Did you
which,
really?
which was a very hard conversation to have with my mother.
What did she say? Obviously, she said fine in the long run, but like, how did that happen?
It
Like, what was
was a
that conversation?
conversation. I mean, she was like, "What is this?" And I said, "Oh." I had to try to explain witchcraft to her, and she's like, wait, is that satanic? I'm like, no. So no, I just wore her down until she finally signed it, and I said, don't show dad, because that's not going to work. So
That's
anyway, oh, I got a
wow.
million stories. I tell you, I saw
Wow.
the best. All right, I'll tell you.
Tell me.
All right, one of the best things. I'll just give you an example of how crazy things were. So our coven, because we were in Brooklyn, and we were in Manhattan area, right? And we didn't get along well with the Gardnerians. That's another whole other story. They lived out in Long Island,
Yes.
and at that time they didn't allow black people in the
Mm-hmm.
covens, and they didn't allow a lot of the stuff. Right? And
Mm-hmm.
we were like, and we had my coven had black people, Hispanic people, gay people. It had
Mm-hmm.
everything, and I thought that was normal.
Mm-hmm. It is normal. It is
Yeah,
normal. That
it
is
is
the
normal
the,
now.
the
That's for sure.
exclusionary
Right.
ideals. That's
Oh
not
yes.
normal. Like,
Oh yeah.
especially for witches. Like, we fucking love everybody. Like,
We
come on.
should,
That's
yeah,
our
but
whole
yeah,
MO. Like, do what you
yeah,
will and harm none. That's our thing, right? Like,
that's
don't be a
it.
dick.
That's it. One of the best, I'll just tell you a quick thing that gives you an indication. So we decided we were going to do a big, I don't remember, I think it was May Day, Beltane or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
ritual in Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
went to Sheep's Head Meadow, which Sheep's Head Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
So we went there and we all had, now being Welsh, we had red robes and green cords. This is just how things were. And so we all showed up there, and several people came with bags of stuff, and they opened up these bags and threw out a huge pentagram, like cloth pentagram on the grass, huge, and then all of a sudden we started pulling out candlesticks,
Of course.
putting one in all four quarters. Now we're in the
Yeah.
middle of Central Park, right?
Yeah.
And there's like hundreds, thousands of people. It's a beautiful day. And everybody, but this is the 70s, right? So nobody even bats an eye. And so, and we're wearing our robes. We have our athames, our big athames. We have the whole thing, right? And then they pull out the altar and they put it in the middle. And there's all of a sudden we have things burning, and we have stuff had to do
Yeah.
with the gods and goddesses, and then we all stand in a circle, and we do this ritual. Nobody, New York, right? Nobody blinks an eye. They're all having picnics next to us, and they're just like
Whatever. It's New
okay,
York. Yeah.
it's New York, right?
Nobody cares.
So after, just as we were finishing, all of a sudden these cops show up. And here we are with these daggers, and most of us are underage. This is a good story. So we just sort of stand there in our robes and everything, and they come up and they look around, and there's stuff burning, and there's and
Open
the guy
flame in the middle of Central Park. Totally
in the middle of
normal.
Central Park. Yeah, right. And so they come and look at us, and they go, like our high priest, who was my age, um, looks at them and goes, "Yes, officer, what can I do for you?" And they look at us and they go, um, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, we're doing a witchcraft festival, ritual, and it's Beltane, and let me explain it to you very, very, very nicely,"
Yeah.
which is hilarious because here's these big cops and here's these guys, they're on the road,
Yeah.
and so the guy's like going, the two cops are going like, okay, and he's looking at the knives and everything. We're expecting any minute to get in big trouble, right?
Yeah.
And and he looks around. He's like, so this is a religious thing you're doing? Yeah. That's right. We're witches. And then they kind of went, oh. So, and then they're smiling, and they look around and they go, you might want to put out the fire, and well, when you're done, make sure you clean up. And we said, okay. And they walked away.
Crazy. Crazy. Right. They didn't give a shit that a bunch of teenagers with open flames and knives and
New York, 19 in the 70s.
in the
And
70s, right?
that
I
was
mean, nowadays it would everybody be filming on their phones and be like, look at all the weirdos, and the cops
oh,
would show up.
we probably end up in
Uh-huh.
jail, right?
I mean, listen, I've done a bunch of things in New York City. We did a New York City Pagan Pride Day for many, many,
Oh,
many.
nice.
I haven't, since I moved away from New York, I don't really do New York City Pagan Pride Day anymore. It still occurs. There's Witch Fest USA, which happens in New York City. Really cool events. And we never had any issues. We never had any issues with cops. We never had any, I mean, we're doing ritual. We have our incense going. You got hundreds of people in the park. We had a Battery Park and Washington Square Park. Those are the two parks that we were in.
Love both those places.
Both places really, really great. But what we would get would be protesters. We would get like crazy Christian protesters. every year the same
Of
people
course, of course.
screaming about, like, like screaming at us, and the
Oh yeah,
cops would
yeah.
have to come and remove them, right?
Nice.
Because religious freedom, we're allowed to be here and do our thing, you
Yes, we
know?
are, and we
Um,
still are. Even
and
today, we still are.
yeah, and we're holding on to that as long as humanly possible.
Yes, exactly.
As long as humanly possible. That is a great story. And you must have learned so much being in that environment as a young
Oh, I did,
person.
and I was the least, I was the least compass about all of this. So, because the group that I ended up with, they lived there and they had been doing this stuff like before me. I came from the
Right,
burbs,
right.
and I was like, yeah. And my grandmother was a dress designer, a top dress designer at Bergdorf Goodman
Ooh.
in her 60s, 70s, and she lived on Lexington. So I used to go there and hang out with her. Then I'd go do witchcraft and God only knows what else. So and she knew, and she'd cover for me and tell my parents, "Oh no, no, he's with me." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm going to punk rock shows and doing things I shouldn't do." So
In the witchcraft world, in your experience of growing up in this really very free environment, right? What was something that really was impactful to your witchcraft practice as you grew into it?
I'd say the main thing was having other people. I mean, my age at the time, I was a teenager, finding other teenage pagans, and I wasn't alone. That was the biggest thing. And like
Mm,
my friend Robert, I told you through pen pal, and then slowly other people our age started to. It was, how magic really works, how the witchcraft really works is people who are scattered because there aren't that many people. They tend to tend to come together. And the magical
yeah,
child was the center of all
yeah,
witchcraft and magic in New York at that time.
yeah.
There were later on there were a few other shops, but that place had everything. And the people who ran it also ran the our tradition, our Welsh tribe tradition, and that was Herman and Eddie, and they were a gay couple who ran the coven, which was very American. But in the 70s, it was also very unique.
Yeah, and very
So,
New York at the time,
oh
to
yeah,
have
oh God,
and to
yes,
have a space where people from all walks of life could come and feel safe. I think you said something really important, saying that the thing that was most impactful for you was finding other people like you,
correct,
and that
correct,
that togetherness and finding community around,
right.
hey, we all believe something a little different. We're all a little different. We're all practicing things somewhat similar, somewhat different, and yet we can find commonality in our differences. Because we're
Exactly.
different, we can
Yeah,
commune together.
that's right. That's exactly right. We finding other people my age who knew they were witches, if from different ways and different things, they had different views.
Yeah,
We all knew that in past lives and in our current life, we were witches and we were pagans, and we were surrounded by people who didn't believe in that, and we couldn't have those conversations with our parents and with people in high school and all that sort of thing. But
mm-hmm.
when we discovered each other, we're like, okay, we're hanging, and so our group, my cluster, my group, we joined Welsh trad and we were involved in our Welsh tradition. But later on, after several years, we sort of formed our own little group and started doing ceremonial magic,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in Kenneth Grant's OTO, and,
Wow,
and
wow,
no, we did everything.
wow. So walk us through this in terms of, like, the growth and the evolution of you as a witch, right? Because this was the Celtic tradition that you were in, right? But we're just reading your bio, right? You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Where are you now? Like, what would you say now, like, is your main practice? And then how would you get from there to here?
My main practice now.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I've come around. because my new book is called Feral Magic, and this will
Hmm.
be out in July.
Hmm.
So this is about animism and about mostly animal spirits and spirits, spirit kin animals and
Right.
whatever you want to say it. But I, I I've devolved, I guess. So I've moved sort of backwards and gotten more and more involved in stuff. And Werewolf Magic, my other books, Werewolf Magic
Yeah.
is that changed my life utterly. Was when I all these things are connected with witchcraft though, because
Yeah.
like digging into I became deeply interested. I have a master's degree in ancient history, okay, and I actually taught university for almost 30 years,
Wow.
linguistics, teaching linguistics and training teachers how to be teachers abroad and other places.
But
So
because you
yeah,
lived in Japan for a long time.
4 years I lived in Tokyo. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh, I have
yeah.
so many questions for you. Like, I love to like how was it being a witch in Japan? Is there witchcraft in Japan
There
as
is
we
witchcraft in
understand it?
Japan. There is. When I was there, now I was there from like 80s into early 90s. I was there for 4 years, and there weren't. I met a couple of witches, but apparently now it's much more much bigger. And so I'm in correspondence with one guy who asked me a lot of stuff, and I sent him stuff, and he's. It's interesting because they're kind of doing like Celtic witchcraft in Japan, which is really an interesting shift.
Right,
But
like European influenced witchcraft in Japan. Like, what does that even look like? You
well,
know, and then like the ancient traditions of the Japanese people, how does that infuse, like how has that influenced your witchcraft?
well, it's so funny because when I went there and I taught at a university there, I was obsessed and really focused on Shinto. And in fact, I wrote a book on it. It's out there. It's called Dancing with Spirits. And I talked to people there who were wanted to know about witchcraft, and I said, no, 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 I want to know about Shinto because
Right.
Shinto is animism, and it's actually really shifted and added a lot of things to my own magical world. Um, but yeah, I thought it was very funny. Here was this white American coming in, and I'd go to all the temples, and I used to. My son was born there, and so we went to all these festivals, and I kept track of everything. And then I was writing in magazines and newspapers uh, for Americans or for other people who didn't understand what was happening in these festivals. And I,
Mhm.
I I got to know exactly what they were. Basically, it's pagans. They're just pagans, but they're focusing more on animistic beings. But all the deities and forms I loved, and so I learned an awful lot about Shinto. And I went to the festivals, and I prayed, and I did all my stuff. And so I'm also a Shinto, I'm also a Shinto devotee. So
Wow. I'm
I do
interested.
everything.
Yeah, I'm interested to know. I'm interested to learn in terms of the Shinto and the animism of Shinto. Where
Mhm.
does, and I know very little,
Okay.
as I think most people in my seat would know very little about that. Those places where they meet with the traditional European style witchcraft and Shinto, could you give us an example of
Absolutely.
some place
Okay.
where those two things meet or overlap?
So let's go back because again, I'm a historian. The reality is that the earliest, paganism, whatever you want to call it, is animism. We know
Mhm.
that 40,000 plus years ago. Animism is just the simple belief that everything is alive,
Mhm.
and that we witchcraft is not so different because
Yep.
we invoke the moon, right? We do drawing down the moon, and we're calling these, but we sort of tend to see them like, oh, the goddess Artemis or the goddess whatever, right? And Cernunnos and Pan, who's my tutelary deity. And so the reality, though, is that long ago, before that, the reality is that everything is alive and that there are spirits everywhere. And so I've actually come back around. I mean, I'm getting old. So, it's been, I don't know, it's 50 years plus that I've been doing this. And the reality is that I'm, if you're doing witchcraft, if you're working directly with nature, that you're probably you have your foot already in animism, because
Hmm.
if we can talk about spirits and we can talk about going to trees and like leaning against trees and getting energy from the trees. That tree is a spirit, has a spirit in it, it has energy.
Hmm.
So that's why my new book is coming around from witchcraft
Right.
all through everything else, and that this is about animism, and
Right.
and that's what I'm doing. So Werewolf Magic got me into animism too, and but I couldn't quit witchcraft, so I had to do Werewolf Pack Magic, which is a
Right.
grimoire, essentially a witchcraft
Right.
grimoire focusing on werewolf magic, which is sounds crazy and weird, but I run a pack of people and we get together on the full moon and we do our shape-shifting thing and we howl and scare my neighbors and have a great
I
time.
think so. There's a lot to unpack there. Okay.
All
There's a lot
right.
to unpack there that I'm sure people have questions about. Like, I have questions. I'm sure people listening have questions about that, right?
Yeah.
When you conjure the word werewolf, there is an image
Hmm.
and a and a connotation in our minds of movies, scary horror movies, fantasy movies,
Hmm.
stories of what we think as a traditional
Oh yeah.
werewolf,
Oh yeah.
right? So
Growing
I
fur and fangs and
correct, correct.
killing people. Yeah,
But
all that.
when we're talking about, and I want to be really clear with people, when we're talking about shape shifting and animism and working with animal spirit, this is
Mhm.
not like watching a movie where fur is growing out of your face and your bones are breaking. Like that's not what we're talking about.
Though it
Uh,
would be fun.
it'd probably be really fucking painful, but I want to discuss, go take that back a notch and
Sure.
talk about the to my mind, all of that comes from working with canine spirit.
Okay, I'm going to go back one step from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So think about witchcraft. Think about the killing times where witches were. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of info. In fact, I have a lot of images from that time, and I did a lot of work in Werewolf Magic. Half of the first half of the book is basically history of the fact that people were doing shape shifting all the way back, and witches were as well. So the reality is that we can, if you look at pictures of witches flying on their broom and all that, they didn't fly on their broom. They went into a deep trance state
Mm-hmm.
and entered other consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and other things. And there's a lot of great stuff in my book about witches that were arrested by the Inquisition and tortured and talked about their coven and about how they shapeshifted, which had to
Mm-hmm.
do rubbing certain oils on them and certain probably some psychedelics that we did, and they'd go into a deep trance state and they'd enter a different
Mm-hmm.
state of being and consciousness. So I got I'll tell you a quick story. I'll tell you how I got to this and what from witchcraft to this, if that's okay.
Yes.
All right. So I had a pretty terrible divorce. It was through no fault of my own. There was a mental illness involved, and I ended up losing my house and a lot of things, and then my job ended up being problematic because of COVID, and I was really really deeply depressed and really in a
Sure.
bad state.
Yeah.
And I also am a tantric, by the way.
Yeah,
This is
I saw that in the
this is
bio, the
not a
tantric.
tantric,
Yeah.
but that's another thing. Anyway, so I do meditation every night, and I do tantric meditation every night. And I was just sitting there, and like everybody else who does magic, I had a very tight circle. I didn't allow other things to
Yeah.
come in. But as I was meditating, all of a sudden this wolf started showing up. And
Mm.
I would be sitting there meditating, all of a sudden this wolf would show up with all the deities I'm working with. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was crazy. I thought I was losing my mind. And so I just ignored it, for about a week. And I finally looked at it in the middle of my meditation. I looked at it, I said, who are you and what are you doing in my circle?
Yeah.
And it looked at me and was quite clear. It said, I'm here for you. You called on me. You're in trouble.
Oh,
You're a mess, and I can help you. And and after a couple of times, I said, okay, so
wow.
this is a kind of animistic moment. This wolf spirit, which I had not invoked, had not asked for, and was just sitting there. And I said, okay, well, what should I do? And it said, I want you to go out in the woods because I lived in a house that was very close to a huge area of woods. So it said, I want you to go into the woods, rip off your clothes, and let your animal self out. And I said,
Wow.
and I got the info and like how to do it. So I did it. And I shifted in that I completely ripped my entire being apart and was out there howling and running around naked in the woods, apparently scaring people, I'm sure. And I came out of it and I was like, oh, I feel 100% better. And I sat down and I called on this wolf again. I said, so tell me more. I said, okay, now I want you to go up into the Cascades, right? I live in Seattle. Cascades is like pure wilderness
Wow.
mountain, and it's like an hour away from here. There's cougars and bears and everything else up there. And if you get lost, you're gone.
Ah,
It said, the wolf said, I want you to go up there. I want you to let your animal out. And then it gave me instructions on how to quote unquote shapeshift, right? So I went up there and I just thought, well, if I die, I die. I mean, I'm just going to do it.
sure. Yeah.
And I went through this process. It takes a couple of hours to go into a state of consciousness where you literally are dropping your upper cortex out and opening your lower cortex and
Yeah.
just going with the pure animal, shutting down your all that ego, all that stuff in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I could walk through the woods and I could see at night. I snuck up on a deer and scared it. I snuck up on a raccoon and scared it. And I was in a completely different state of consciousness. I was in a pure animal state of consciousness.
Wow.
I did not grow fur. I wish I had. I did not grow fangs. I wish I had. But I was in a completely different trance state. And I came back and out of it. And my first reflection was, next time I do this, I have to wear sandals because my feet are really a mess walking through the forest. but I came back into it, and meanwhile I'm writing all these things down in my diary,
Yeah.
my witchcraft diary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Writing everything I'm doing. This wolf is feeding me and telling me like, okay, now do this, now do this, now do this, and I'm just writing it all down. And I told a friend of mine, she's like, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just going to call it Werewolf Magick because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And she's like, let me see. And she looked at this. She goes, you need to publish this. I said, no one is going to publish this. I am out of my mind. And no, you've got it. Okay. So I pushed it off. I pushed it off, and I kept getting bugged. And then I showed it to other people who some thought I was nuts, and some said, no, you really need to sell this. So I went to PantheaCon,
Yeah.
and I had 4 different scripts of different books that I wanted to sell, and I finally added Werewolf Magick as a very short thing because people kept bothering me. So I went there, and I got interviewed by Llewellyn and Weisers. And I know both. I know both of the people. They're very nice
Mm-hmm.
people. And I sat down and we went. I said, "How about this one? No. How about this one? No. How about this one? No. How about this one? Werewolf Magick. We
What's
want it."
that? Yeah.
And I said, "What?" So both of them said, "We want it." And I said, "What? Really?" And so apparently I've got, I don't know, 12, 15 books written. This is the most popular book
Well,
I've
I think that there's something, again, you're talking about when you strip it all away, you're talking about primal, transcendent magic. You're talking about connecting with earth and nature in a
right.
way in which, like you said, your ego is turned off and you're just being. And
Right.
you're just being with that animal spirit. In this
Animal self.
case,
Your animal self.
right. In this
Yeah,
case, in your case, what the story you just told, it was wolf spirit, right?
correct.
right? In this case,
You
it was
got it.
wolf spirit,
You got it. Doesn't
but
have to be
it
wolf.
doesn't have to be, right?
No,
So that brings us to your new book, which is the Feral
correct.
Magick book. So what I want
Very
to do is I
good.
want to take a quick break, and then we're going
Sure.
to come back and talk about the new book, Feral Magick, because I'm very into all of this and I'm interested to hear how it works. So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back with Denny Sargent.
I'm
We
going to show
are
you something else too.
back. We are back here with Denny Sargent. And we're
I don't-
talking about animal magic and animism and werewolf magic. And I'm really interested to talk to you about the new book, which is Feral Magick, Unleash Your Inner Animal Self. So
Right,
before the break, we were talking about how you had this profound experience with wolf spirit. And that
right.
kind of spawned all of this stuff with the werewolf magic. And I know you have another book about dog magic, which really
That's right.
fascinates me. And I think a lot of folks, because we have such great relationships with our canine companions, would be very, very interested in that. But I don't want to get sidetracked. I want to stay on task. So what we were saying was you had this profound experience with wolf spirit, but
Right,
feral magic, being able to connect with an animal spirit
right.
and sort of let that those characteristics into you or let go of your humanness for a period of time so that you can be one with that spirit. Tell us about how that works. If it's not wolf, because you obviously know wolf really, really well. But
Apparently.
what if it was rabbit? Like my spirit
Sure.
animal is rabbit. So
Okay. Let's go back to ancient. Let's go back to witchcraft during the witchcraft time,
yes.
right? If you look at the old images, you see witches going to the Sabbath or going to a trance and entering the Sabbath, and some are riding wolves, some are look like wolves or are half wolves, right? What we ridiculously call werewolf, but that but others are rabbits, others fly as birds. So I mean, one of the things I realized after doing werewolf magic, the werewolf magic stuff was going going deeply into it and realizing like, oh no, there's a lot of people who different kinds of shape shifting, and that is the in many ways part of the origin of witchcraft, which takes us back to animism because
Right.
witchcraft or it starts with that. One of the things I talk to people about is Norse paganism, and in Norse paganism there's things called berserkers, right? There's a berserker. A berserker, they were huge, warriors who would shapeshift into a bear. Now they didn't actually turn into bears, but they would become incredibly, almost impossible to kill fighters. There weren't just bear sark. Some were bear sark, some were bear shifters. Some were called ulfsark, which were wolf shifters, and you don't get to hear that so much. It's in my book. So there's a great movie, by the way. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. But anyway, there's a couple of movies out there about berserkers and how they shapeshift. And then the movie that I recently saw was really great, and that they're in a cave, and then there's the shaman, and he has them eating mushrooms, and then he's doing this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they go completely, some turn into berserkers, not physically, but they go into that mode, and then some turn into
Mm-hmm.
wolf stark.
Right.
So
They
so
embody the energy of bear. They
and become
embody the
right.
energy of wolf.
And they literally go into that zone, and
Yeah.
they get shot with arrows, they get hacked, and they climb up, they take that's how the Vikings took over, was this sort of group of animistic, powerful sort of witchcraft type of people. So it's all been there. I mean, it's all been there in witchcraft and pre-witchcraft paganism and Greek
Mm-hmm.
paganism. And
Mm-hmm.
and in my book I have a ton of stuff there where different people went around the world, and like the Greeks went around and looked at different cultures and talked about,
Mm-hmm.
in Ireland and Ossory, the entire tribe shifts into werewolves every year for 1 week. And you hear this again and again and again and again. And so I put in my book, and I was like, I was like, well, so there's always been groups of people that shifted into werewolves or other animal forms, and they would just flip into a different state of consciousness and as a part of their religious
Hmm.
pagan traditions, and
Hmm.
then after a week they would come back out of it. And I thought, I like this idea. So,
Right. Right. Right.
so I'm still a witch, I'm still a witch. I'm a pagan. I'm a tantric, but I'm also, I'm a wolf. I mean,
So if someone is reading this book, Feral Magic, and they're getting into animism and this type of transcendent state of being for the
mhm,
first time, first of all, this doesn't feel like something that a beginner should do without doing research and learning first, right? But what is something, if someone wanted to dip their toe in this pool and they've got your book, Feral Magic, and they're learning about
right,
this type of magic, this type of
right,
witchcraft, what is a tip, one or two tips for someone just starting out with this type of work that you
sure,
would recommend?
sure. So, I, I, I wrote the book, and then I went to Starwood. I don't know if you know Starwood. It's a big festival in Ohio. I've been going there for the last few years. They're very nice people,
Mm-hmm.
and I highly recommend everybody goes to Starwood. It's probably the largest gathering now in America
Mm-hmm.
of pagans, witches, and etc. And I did several recently. The last year, I did several presentations on feral magic, and to see if this worked with people. So just to give you a couple of specific examples. So we're talking about animistic spirits, meaning that everything in nature is spirits, and that
Yes.
the witchcraft has to connect with nature, and being within nature changes everything, right? That's our most magical. Okay, New York was different, but but so for example, I had everybody go into a trance state. I have some shamanic techniques. I've met several real shamans in Guatemala, the rainforest in Guatemala, in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I hung out with and actually have information from Siberian shamans who came over from the Ulchi people who came over.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some ideas. I do not claim to be a shaman, but I got some techniques and ideas and they were all interested in working directly with spirits, nature
Mm-hmm.
spirits, which is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we call it a god or goddess. Other times we just say, like the horn god. I'm a big fan of the god Pan. This is
Mm-hmm.
my grimoire, my Pan grimoire, and but there's lots of horn deities and Cernunnos and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So spirit, if we just pull back all that stuff and just go into nature. For example, I had my people in my group all go off into the woods. I put them into a trance state, very simple trance state
Right.
with humming and chanting, and not so much chanting, but rocking and swaying, different techniques. And I said, I want you to go into the woods and find the tree that is alive to you, the tree that attracts you. And they all went, and I didn't know if it would work. And they all went off and they all found a tree that had a connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want you, and I had told them, I want you to relate to that as you like, and then come back and talk to us. And they all came back with astounding experiences,
Mm.
and they weren't expecting it. And they said, there's this female spirit in this tree. And I was closing my eyes and feeling it, and it came and it told me these things. It made me feel better.
Right.
And I had one person who said, I didn't see anything and walked away. But there was 30 people there, and they all went, oh, no, no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
no. So that's in essence, that's feral magic. Feral magic is working with spirit animal spirits or spirit animals or nature spirits or that instead of saying like I'm going to call on Pan or I'm going to call on Cernunnos or I'm going to call
Right.
on Artemis, you can go directly as they did thousands of years ago. The Cro-Magnon people and whatnot, we know that they were painting caves with animistic spirits. And by the way, the earliest image of a werewolf is it's in Portugal, and it's like what was it, about 50,000 years old on the wall, and it shows a guy walking with a spear
Mm.
hunting, who's half wolf and half human. So that was my go-to. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, So it's all witchcraft is part of animism. I mean, witches long ago in Europe, they had very little,
Yeah.
and so they worked with the herbs and they did spells that they did themselves. And some of it came from Viking stuff
Right.
or stuff. Some of it came from this, some of it came from this. But all the witches were doing things intuitively, directly with nature,
Mhm.
And
So,
when oh, go on, I'm sorry.
so I just kind of want to get like one thing or two things
Got
that if
it.
someone is looking at your book, they've got feral magic, they want to buy this book, they're really interested in animism and working with animal spirits and
Right.
right, and they're a beginner because again, this is heavy magic, right? What is
This is a little
one
bit lighter than Werewolf Magic, but okay.
it's a little bit lighter than werewolf magic, but we're still talking about shape shifting and we're talking about
Right.
transcendent states of mind and things like that. Could you give us something, one
Yes.
thing or two things that
Yes.
a person can do to get started on this path?
Got it. First thing I have in the first section I have in the book is helping people walk through their five senses, going to nature, but going to nature.
Yes.
Don't just go to like a park full of people. I mean, get out into real nature where you can be alone and with animals and birds and everything else.
Yeah.
And then so I walk through the first part of the book. I walk through going through and like focusing only on what you see and shutting down everything else. Then after a time, focus on everything you can touch, then everything you can taste. So I work through all the five senses, and each time asking people and helping them walk through to shut down their brain, shut down shut down their cognition, instead of going, oh, that's a really pretty, instead of like look at the tree, listen to the bird without cognating and just open up to it. And at a certain point, I did this with groups. At a certain point, if you shut down all those things and only focus on receiving like the cries of birds and the feeling of a tree and the taste of a leaf, or that at a certain point, if I then we do some very simple humming, chanting, rhythmic stuff, and then people all of a sudden start to see like little lights amongst the trees. They start to see the spirits. And I knew that I could. I didn't know if they could, but they all could. Like I said, except there's almost always one person who storms off, and so and always right. And so that's the first part of the book, is really like you have to immerse yourself and you have to open up your brain to the idea that everything is alive,
Right. And
and
be
that
in the space now in your body.
in your
Right.
body
In your body, not in your brain. Ground center
right,
in your body. What can you
right,
see? I love the idea of walking in nature with only your senses and not thinking about it, not trying
right.
to analyze what kind of tree is this or what sort of bird did I just see, or oh, do I have to go grocery shopping when I'm done with this walk? Just how does it feel? How does it look? How does it taste? How does it smell?
All
And
those things.
being just in your senses, I think,
Right.
is such a great first step to finding that openness to the
Mhm.
natural world.
That's exactly it. And then I have some techniques, like certain ways. I have certain humming segments that I do that
Mhm.
puts you into a light trance and opens you up. And then the idea is to pull back and stop guessing or thinking and just sort of open it up. And at a certain point, you can sit down and close your eyes and you start to see, they come to you, like the spirits are there. And first you have to accept that they are there, that everything
Mhm.
in nature is manifest as spirits as you choose. If you don't believe in it, it's not going to show up, right? But if you do, all of a sudden. And then another thing I do in here that's just later on in the book is I take something from the Werewolf Magic, and I say, and because I started to realize people were coming to me saying, okay, I'm not a wolf. I'm an otter. I'm this. I'm this. I'm this. And I realized, oh, I have to take what I was doing in Werewolf Magic and open it up for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this book is. This book is an opening it up so that anybody
Yeah.
who's interested in actually connecting, like opening up their animal self and then
Yeah.
connecting with what they know is their animal self, right? And so,
or what they don't know, right? Because I would
right,
imagine that a lot of folks would be like, oh, cool. I'm going to go out and I'm going to connect with nature and I'm going to find my inner wolf. I'm going to find my inner bear. Oh, I'm going to be a warrior. I need that strength, like what you want. And then maybe you're a ladybug.
yeah,
Like
yes,
maybe
that's
ladybug
exactly right.
comes to you and ladybug is like, hi, we
That's
just want to
exactly right. That's
pollinate and
exactly
hang
right.
out, like to be open to whatever that animal spirit
Correct.
is and
Correct.
let it kind of talk to you.
That's it. And that's animism. The
Yeah.
animism is basically, you don't know. I mean, look, and I mentioned this in my other books, but I mentioned this book a lot too, that we genetically have all animal DNA in us.
Right.
That is truth. That is
Right.
science. That is
Right.
not weird. I
Right.
mean, it's all there, you know? So when
Yeah.
people say, well, I don't know, why can you be a werewolf? And I said, it's in my DNA. And they don't understand. And I look, I get out a book and I go,
Yeah.
look, we every DNA form is in us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into a deep trance state, and anybody who's into witchcraft or any of these things has experienced these trance states where animal forms are there, and but I mean, what my animal form that triggers me the most is mine. And then I've come to the understanding that's how why I ended up writing this book. I realized like a lot of people are calling me and going, well, yeah, but I'm an otter, or
Right.
I'm this and I'm that. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, really, I should back off on like, wolf
Which
owned stuff.
makes sense if we are all of the same stuff.
Right,
Like we are
right,
all the same stuff. We're all universal molecules and we're
right.
all made up of the same stuff. Mine manifests as a chubby Italian girl from New York. My cat manifests as a black cat with black whiskers, right? Like, but we're made of the same primordial,
We are.
right?
We're all animals. And this
Right.
is the biggest problem that Americans, well, not just Americans, but higher cortex humans have an issue separating animal and person. Like this is,
Mm-hmm.
this has to do Judeo-Christianity and all that stuff that,
Mm-hmm.
animals are considered not important. They don't have a life. They're not real. You can kill them, whatever. But we're animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're
We're
mammals.
animals.
We're just mammals that have giant brains that get in the way. Right.
That's correct. And so the thing that really helped me in Werewolf Magic was this idea of unleashing my animal self and shutting down. So I use that technique in feral magic, but I open it up to, don't have an expectation. Like if
Right.
first start by thinking, going into nature, by sitting down and meditating, like what animal, when you were a child, I always start with this, when you were a little child wandering around, in the grass, wherever you were, you saw animal spirits. Every single child did.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I did. And you have an idea of, and you call it your imaginary friend, but you probably have an animal that you've always felt drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good start. So and so I have a whole thing in this book too. A little, it's a diff. I've changed it. I actually, I evolved to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
So I have people like going into a trance state, and then opening up to all the spirits in the woods.
Right.
And I have a technique to make sure they have a protection and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then different. So I did this with groups of people in Ohio because I didn't do it with other people before, and I wanted to see what happened. And oh my God, that we moved the second or third time thing I did. I said, okay, you guys did this thing with the trees. Now I want you to see if we can open up to animals, to
Right.
animal spirits or whatever.
Right.
I expected it would be, oh my God, they came back,
Yeah.
they erupted. They said, oh, this hawk came and it's on my shoulder and I feel it inside me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I have, this is a major thing for me. And I'm sitting there going, whoa. Um,
I think the pull of the natural world for witches is one of the things that defines us is our connectivity to the natural world. And because animals are so important, we really do connect with them, we identify with them. And when we are able to sort of, like you say, get out of our cerebral beings and into our primal beings, that's where we can really connect. And that's where the feral magic really comes in.
Correct.
Denny, this has been really enlightening. You have a lot of information. You have so much to share. So I hope everyone grabs a copy of Feral Magick. This is out in July.
Yeah.
Yep. So at the time of airing, we're airing this in June, so it will be available very, very soon.
Nice.
Where can everyone purchase this book and your other books? Let us know.
Well, Weiser's, I've moved to Weiser's, and Weiser's have done an excellent job of promoting the book, and it's everywhere. I mean, I
Right.
can't.
So wherever books are sold.
Yeah, yeah, wherever books are sold.
Yep. And support your local bookstores.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And Werewolf Magick and Werewolf Pack Magick are easy to find. This book I'm really pleased with. It took me 2 years to write. I've,
Wow.
I've been a tantric since 1980,
Cool.
and this one is harder to find. So if anybody happens to be interested in tantra, Tantra for All is my baby.
And
But
so where can we find you online? Can you give us your website? Where's the best way to follow you?
well, we can talk about werewolfmagic.com, but if that's a little bit problematic, they can just write me, or excuse me, the URL as dennysargentauthor.com.
DennySargeantAuthor.com. And we're going
Right.
to put that on the show notes. So anybody who's interested, they can go in and click right there and it'll take you over to Denny and you can follow Denny and buy all of the books and learn about feral magic and werewolf magic and all of this animism. So, so, so cool.
I have one more thing. So I started a group on Facebook, Werewolf Magic.
Yeah.
I just, I don't know. I just thought I would give it a shot. I got 800 people on it.
Amazing.
So if anybody's interested in that, they can.
Yes. Is
I
that
have a lot of
accessible through
videos
your
there.
links as well? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
there's all kinds of stuff in it. So anyway.
Excellent. Oh, that's really cool. So if anybody's interested in werewolf magic, they can find that on Facebook. All right. And again, we'll put all that in the show notes. People will definitely be able to find you for sure. Denny, I have one
Nice.
last question. And
Sure.
I ask this to everyone that comes on the show.
Mhm.
I'm a kitchen witch. So if you could have me cook you one magical meal, what would it be and
Ooh,
why?
ooh. Oh my God, I love eating everything. Um, hmm, hmm. Okay, so when I was a serious Welsh trad witch, people would cook magical cookies and cakes that were specifically created for different different high holy days, in witchcraft.
Mhm.
So, like in Yule, people would make a Yule. I don't,
Specifically something for whatever is the Sabbath
right,
that's
with the
coming
with the
forth.
right herbs and the right
Right.
spices and all
Right.
that stuff. I always thought that was really awesome. Um,
So is there a specific Sabbath that you would want a cake or a dessert for? Because
I
all of
call
those, I do a lot of seasonal cooking. So a lot of
really
those are, yeah, that's a huge part of my practice. So, like,
nice.
as we're going into the summer and we're heading towards the summer solstice, like, there are certain flavors that I would use. I would use lemon. I would use
Exactly.
like a lilac syrup. I would use, a homemade violet jam in a lemon
Ooh,
cake. So because that is so seasonal, that's the kind of thing that I would make for a high holy celebration.
nice. No, I like it all. A friend of mine who's a witch. Uh, I had a quince tree which I didn't know what to do with,
Ooh,
and she came and took a whole bunch and did this whole magical thing and delivered a jar of quince jelly that glows at night. So
that's
so
amazing.
I'm a big fan of all of that. I truly believe in it. I mean, so and you can look it up in books, and get these herbs go with midsummer and these things
Mhm,
go with, yeah. So I like it all. If I had to pick one, I would say Yule, because
mhm,
the Yule log is really an old, old, old thing. But
mhm.
making particular like bread or sort of delicious things. For Yule is goes way back. I mean, that goes back
Oh
thousands
yeah.
of years.
Oh
So
yeah, for
with
sure.
the right things, the right,
And all those things that we're considering right are based on where your region is, right?
right.
So Yule, again, like I see a lot of oranges at Yule and a lot of spice at Yule, and I might do like an orange spice uh cocoa, like so like a cocoa Yule log with some sort of a cranberry filling because you have those winter fruits,
I'll
if
take
you were
it.
Denny, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on animism, and your new book, Feral Magic, out through Wiser, is available July. So make sure everyone goes out and buys that. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to get to know you
It was
and your
really fun.
journey.
It was
I'm
really fun.
really glad you had a great time. Thank you
Oh, I had a
so much.
great time. You
Yay.
can, this is the kind of person I am, you can see that. I'll be at Starwood, and I'm going to be doing animism, three different and very important animistic things there, presentations, and um, it'll be fun.
Great.
Yeah, no,
Great.
no, no. And anybody who wants to talk to me, you can go to my website,
Yep.
and there's a little thing saying, "Oh, if you want to talk to me, there's my email, williamdennysargent@gmail.com." I talk to everybody.
Well, and we will make sure that everybody can reach you. We'll put all of your website information right
Sure.
here. Thank you
Great.
so much again, Denny.
Oh,
And
thank
it's
you. You're
and
delightful.
thank you. So are you.
Sometime we should talk again about New York because
Oh
there's
goodness.
way more
It's
to
a
talk
whole
about.
nother conversation. Thank you everyone for being here. And until next time, I wish you so many blessings and so much
Same to
gratitude.
you. Oh.
Oh.